Hi there, guys, and welcome to a special edition of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the independent podcast that's brought to you by fans for fans. Just a quick show today, guys. It's not the usual show that we do every Sunday. It's just a quick reaction show. As most of you will be aware, the Europa League draw has just taken place, so we thought we would have a wee discussion about that, and obviously a wee discussion about last night's game as well. An absolutely superb result and performance. You have to say that Steven Gerrard has these ties sussed. You know, he just seems unbeatable in these things, which is great. I had a wee feeling that this was going to be the year that we would maybe come unstuck a wee bit, but that's not been the case. We're through. We're into the group stages for the third year in a row. We've been drawn against Benfica, Standard Liège, and it's the last team, Pej Loznan or something like that, the Polish team. I've actually failed to take a note of it, which is terrible research, really, but there we go. So I've got Ross and I've got Alex with me. How are you doing, guys?
Very good, Colin. Yeah, delighted to be sort of sat here struggling through another one of those tedious Europa League draws where they do a big montage at the start and introduce an ex-player that you'd forgotten about and wait 40 minutes to actually get to the draw. I'm just delighted to get to suffer through that again.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, how are you, Alex?
I'm absolutely tremendous. Colin, just laughing at my hypocrisy earlier in the season, saying I was going to be quite happy if Rangers went out of Europe early, because obviously that's what we need to win the league. Cut to last week when we won 4-0 in Holland, and I'm like, we cannot lose this now. We have to go through, and they did again. So I've just been sitting here enjoying a lovely continental brunch.
Continental brunch? Oh, check you. That's tomato soup and bread. What are you having?
I'm having coffee and
right. You made it sound a lot fancier than it actually is, to be fair.
It's the continental aspects provided by watching that draw on BT Sport.
All right, fair enough. Right, guys. Well, before we go into the draw, which is, you know, Benfica were in pot 1, Standard Liège pot 2, ourselves in pot 3, and Lech Poznan in pot 4. Before we go into that, a wee discussion about last night. It really was. I mean, first half for me, yeah, it was a bit edgy, a bit nervy. You could tell that both teams knew there was a lot at stake, and no one really overcommitting. But the second half performance, I thought was outstanding. Ross, yourself, what did you think? I mean, the second half especially, the 2 goals, we were talking about it before we came on air, especially the move building up to the second goal. There was more than one occasion last night, and I got a couple of texts with a few mates, one of them being David Wren from the pod, you know, basically saying, you know something, see when we play, we're a right good side. And that's what I felt last night as well. And I felt like that a couple of times this season. Now, I know there's been a couple of blips, especially the one at Livingston. I wasn't overly concerned about the one at Easter Road. I thought Easter Road wasn't as bad a result as everyone made out. But there has been a couple of blips. But when we hit top form, we look a really, really good side. And we showed that in the second half last night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first half was interesting because the first 10-15 minutes, I thought we looked up for it. And we were looking exceptionally hungry and knew that we could get a result. Obviously, Galatasaray rode that out and kind of grew into the game a wee bit. And the last half hour of the first half was just a little bit tense and nervy, and both teams trying to feel each other out and hit on the break. But now the second half, we just had the ball on the floor, moving it nicely. The passing was exquisite. Some of the best passing I've seen from us in a number of years. I actually have to say the defence was so strong, was so resolute. You know, maybe the Galatasaray goal is an exception, but it was a wonderful performance. The goals were fantastic to watch. The movement, the way they moved the ball, the running off the ball, some performances that were excellent from players who maybe have a tendency to go missing a wee bit or blow hot and cold. No, I was really, really, really impressed.
Alex, in terms of performances now, I think Ross is right there. You know, the defence was outstanding last night, and I think, I mean, I know Graham Souness was quite critical of Alan McGregor for the goal. I actually think it's one of those ones he's made such an effort to get to it, and he's just got his fingertips to it that he's taken it away from it. It looked to me like Ryan Jack was going to get it and head it off the line. But McGregor's so determined to get it, he just gets that wee touch on it and it takes it away from him. So I thought any criticism of the goals is slightly harsh. But I mean, up until that point, we were just superb. And a few performances I think that we need to highlight. I mean, we've had many a conversation about Tav on here, you know, is he good enough to be a captain? You know, defensively he can sometimes be a bit sus. Last night he was everything that you want from a captain. I thought his performance last night was outstanding. And also another one I think is worth mentioning is Scotty Arfield. You know, what we spoke about him on Sunday. You know, he's been in and out of the team, but his performances of late, I don't know if it's comfy. It just seems to be on another level. I also think Hadji. I mean, he's taken a wee bit of stick, but again, you know, like the goal at Easter Road, you know, the assist that he's getting, it's just one touch. You know, he's not taking 2 or 3 touches and giving, you know, defenders time to readjust. It's just one touch, taking players out of the game, set up Arfield brilliantly last night. So 2 or 3 performances that I thought were worth mentioning.
Yes, I think right across the board though. I think we're seeing the kind of fruition of the Gerrard Beale kind of vision. The mobility for me is the main thing, and like you're saying, there's guys just taking a single touch, or even in the case of Alfie last night, stepping over the ball, not even touching it, just the movement is what's making us unplayable at times. When we move the ball like that, we're actually one of those teams that we've spent decades hating to see Rangers play in Europe. We've become the kind of team that we used to see coming to Ibrox and thinking, oh God, if we only had that kind of nous. Galatasaray must at times have been scared to attack us last night, because the minute they get anywhere near our box, we're absolutely lethal on the counter-attack. And Super Ali was talking at Easter Road the other week, I remember that in co-commentary, saying just before we scored a nearly perfect goal, he was talking about how Rangers look like they're trying to score the perfect goal. And we've criticised them in that respect ourselves over the past few seasons. But it's coming together. They're getting to the point where they are scoring near perfect goals. That the movement for the first one's absolutely phenomenal, but the second one, they're covering. The goalie's rolling it out to Goldson, who's giving it to Tav, while their strikers are in our box on top of us. And next thing you know, it's in the back of their net, and it's Tav that's putting it there. The captain, I think, just sums up the fact that it's all coming together. It's getting ahead of myself. It's early doors in terms of the season, what have you, but you can't deny the level that we're playing at. And the teams we're beating out and the way we're beating them in Europe, it's just getting steadily, incrementally better every season. It's phenomenal.
Sorry for coughing there. Alex, I interrupted you. I tried to go on mute, but I never clicked it in time, so sorry.
You need to get yourself a continental coffee, mate, not straight mute.
I mean, that's me. I'll go all over Twitter that I've got the COVID because I'm coughing, but I can assure you I'm no asthmatic. That's why I cough. Ross, coming back to yourself now, I mean, I sat and watched it with my son last night, and I have to say, we've spoken about this before, some of the games this year, because it's, you're stuck in the house watching them, there's no crowds at the game. The games do lack an edge, and I must admit, there's been times I've been watching the games and we've scored a goal, and it's not been the usual celebration. Last night, me and my son were, our arses were off the couch at both goals, proper celebrations. But there does feel a bit of a come down today because, with regards to Benfica, that's a club we've never played competitively before. I was doing a wee bit of digging around the internet before we came on. We played them in 1965 in a challenge match, but we've never actually played them in a competitive environment before. And I'm not as bad as Alex. I know Alex is big for ticking off teams that he's seen, in Europe. And I'm a wee bit like that as well. So when you see Benfica coming out the hand, you think, we've never played them before, and I'm not going to get to see them. There is that sort of downside to it, and I know you're based in London, so you don't get to Ibrox as often as you want to get, but you do enjoy, an away trip. So it's almost like there's a celebration that we're in the group section again. We've got a good draw, we've got a chance of getting out of it, but there's also that deflated feeling from a supporter's perspective that we're not going to get to see any of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's bittersweet. It's a lot more sweet than it is bitter. I'm delighted that we are where we are. Yeah, it's a shame that we won't get to go and experience it. So, I mean, obviously we did Portugal last year a couple of times, which was great. I think that Poznan would have been a wonderful trip for fans to go. And I don't know. I suppose we've probably never played them before either. So for us to go to a town like Poznan, I think would have been a cracking away trip. But yeah, look, it's a shame. I spent a year out in Luxembourg, which is only 2 hours down the road from Liège, and all my mates over there saying that they're going to head over to Liège for the day. And I have to say, I'm really close to thinking about joining them and just going over to Liège for the trip. And I don't know, maybe try and blag a media pass or something to try and get into the game. But it's a real shame because, nights like last night are the nights that Ibrox would have been bouncing. Remember that, obviously, Colin, you were at the game against Legia Warsaw 12 months ago, and remember the atmosphere that night, or the atmosphere when we beat Rapid Vienna with the Daniel Candeas back heel to Morelos
yeah.
goal. Last night would have topped that. And can you imagine the feeling if we beat Benfica at Ibrox to go through, or if we go away to somewhere like Benfica, like we did against Porto, and these massive powerhouses of European football. Benfica, 100% record in Portugal this season, albeit only a couple of games. They're a strong side, and I'm delighted that we get to test ourselves against these clubs. I think we've got a great chance of getting out of the group. But yeah, it's tinged with a wee bit of sadness that we'll be watching them on BT Sport as opposed to actually getting to experience them live.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I've only really done one away trip in my time, and that was a few years ago when we went to PSG. But I love the European nights, and it's been good recently because since I've started taking my boy to the games, Rangers were in the sort of the lower leagues at the time, and they never really got exposure to big European nights at Ibrox. And the last 2 years have been really good. I finish always, like, I work in the city, so I always finish early. He comes through once he's finished with school. We go for something to eat. I'll have a couple of pints and he'll have a cola, and there's always an atmosphere in the city when these nights come around. And it's going to be, I can't deny it. It is a wee bit bittersweet, as you say, that we're not going to get there. But I suppose being there at all, given the sort of qualification stages that we've had to go through for the last 3 years, to do it for the third year in a row sort of makes everything good, I suppose. But there is that wee bittersweet. And Benfica, we've never played them before, and it would have been a name. I mean, I think Alex will be fuming at that, but it's great, but there is that wee sting in the tail. Alex, on the group itself, so we've got, as we said, we've got Benfica, 37 league titles, 2 European Cups, back in the 60s. Standard Liège, they've got 10 league titles, and they were runners up in the Cup Winners' Cup in the sort of early 80s. We've played them before. We played them in the quarter-final of the European Cup back in 1961-62. And They put us out 4-3 in aggregate. We got beat over there 4-1, and we won the home leg 2-0. So we've got a wee bit of history there, and we're maybe due them a black eye. I can't find anything with us playing Lech Poznan before, but they've got 7 league titles. So teams with a certain amount of calibre behind them, which you would expect at the group stage. But in terms of getting out of the group, I mean, I put it out on Twitter that, I think we could get out of this group fairly easy, and someone came back saying, get out it, we should top that group. And there maybe is a bit of that. You maybe look at the performances that we put in Europe and think, what, we could maybe top that group.
Yeah, I think that's the only danger under Steven Gerrard's Rangers in Europe. He's just he's taken away the anxiety, and that's always a dangerous thing. Looking at last night's game, I'm not saying for 1 second I was glad that Galatasaray scored, but it was actually a wee reminder of what it is to be tense after the baby blown them away in that kind of 7-minute spell. Because you look at even the playoff games over the last few seasons, when we were in Ufa, you're a bit a part of Russia that should actually be playing in the Asian Confederation. You're getting 2 men sent off, you're hanging on for dear life. It's absolutely crazy, back to the wall stuff. Then you go to the Legia Warsaw game, more of a kind of chess match, but it is, you're expecting extra time and penalties, and then we get a goal last minute of the game. Place absolutely explodes, just with relief as well as celebration. And then last night, again, you're always tense with these games. It's a close first half, but by the end of it, you're thinking, I'm getting gradually less and less worried every time we're in these playoffs about getting into the group stage without even knowing it. It's kind of counterintuitive. I always like to even just from a superstitious point of view, I like to try and remain worried. But Gerrard's making it harder and harder. And we're looking at this group today, and yeah, I'm not talking about topping it. The only fear for me is that the confidence I'm feeling somehow spreads itself to the players, even though we're not on the ground. Because I don't see anything there that's certainly any harder than anything we've faced in the last 3 seasons. And the one thing with Stevie G's Rangers is they just don't they don't make a fool of themselves. They dispatch minnows the way minnows should be dispatched. They don't lose at Ibrox. Generally, by Leverkusen are the only team to beat us at Ibrox. In like 35 games now under Gerrard in Europe. And when we started the first season, away in the group stages, teams could beat us, but it would be narrowly, and they'd have to fight like hell for it. In Spartak Moscow's case, they need a really bad offside decision. Last season, we're going to Porto and Feyenoord, to Warsaw, to Braga, and we're drawing or we're winning. So this season, we're clearly improving again, standard-wise, with what we've seen already. I'm actually quite scared by how confident I'm feeling. And I think that confidence is overtaking the fact that I will not get to see Benfica at Ibrox, and that's royalty versus royalty. To see Benfica were always playing Celtic, they're always drawing Celtic. Of course, I'm never going to go there to see them. I eventually went down to Anfield to see them about 10 years ago in the Europa League quarters when Stevie G was playing, and helped kind of dispatch them, just because I had to get Benfica off the list. But that's a team you could see. It's no about list sticking with them. It's like Real Madrid, Barcelona. You want to see Benfica. And by the way, when Standard Liège beat us in those quarterfinals in '62, they get gubbed in the semi-finals by Real Madrid, and then Real Madrid themselves, Puskas scored a hat-trick in the first half of the final in Amsterdam, and they get beat 5-3 by Benfica. And that's the last time Benfica won anything in Europe, but they are absolute royalty, and I'm gutted I won't see them.
Impressive use of the word dispatched there, Alex. I like that. Very, very professional.
That's the continental coffee working.
It's kicking in. Ross, again, coming back to the group, I mean, how do you feel about it? I mean, you could argue that we should have topped the group last year. It was just that final result. I think we drew in the last game against Young Boys, and I think it was a late goal. We were topping the group until, we were going through, but we were going through as winners of that group until the last few minutes, which was a wee bit frustrating. So, again, without being overconfident and without being borderline arrogant, we certainly have nothing to fear. And if we play the way we can play, we do have a good chance of not just getting out of that group, but topping it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to overcommit and overpromise. I mean, Benfica are no better in my mind than Porto, and I think I'm right in saying that Porto won the Portuguese Primeira Liga last year. So, we should feel very confident against them. We're certainly a better side than we were when we faced Porto as well. And this style of football suits us. It doesn't always work in the Scottish Premier League, but it works in Europe. Standard Liège, I don't have a great deal of fear about at all. I mean, they aren't the dominant force in Belgian football, and we've come up against tougher sides, I think, in the qualifiers already. I'm not sure that Standard Liège are up to the same standard as a Galatasaray, for example. So yeah, I'm confident. I have a good degree of confidence that we'll get out of the group, which is a wonderful feeling. Again, financially, for the prestige of the club, it's a really, really good feeling. I'd love to top it because it makes the next stage a little bit easier, but we didn't need to top it last time. We dispatched Braga with real confidence and with ease in the end. So yeah, I'm very, very optimistic. It's a good draw. You look at who the Tim's got over the other side of the city, and I don't think they'll be feeling quite as confident. So yeah, altogether, I'm very relieved and pleased with how that's gone.
Alex, the comment that Ross made there about financially it's good for the club, it brings me on to the sort of next point in this, and that's the impact that getting into that group stages has in the club, particularly financially. Now, Steven Gerrard has spoken frequently over the last few weeks about that he wants a midfielder in the door. It felt like, and I think he alluded to it himself last week in one of his interviews, that it could be dependent on last night's result. Now we're in the group stages, that's confirmed. So, that confirms that extra revenue that the club needs. There's talk now online that Mo Besic is travelling north for a medical with Rangers. So it would appear that, it was dependent on that, and this midfielder that Steven Gerrard wants, there's been talk of Lewis Ferguson and a couple of others up here. It seems like it was dependent on getting through those group stages, or into the group stages, sorry, and that if the social media is to be believed, there's moves happening already.
Yeah, and I think you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, Colin. I had us spending the 20 million that we were going to get for Morelos, and you quite rightly said, well, if number one, we might not make the European group stages. Number two, we don't have fans coming through the door. You know, I mean, the whole COVID situation is obviously affecting everybody's income right across football. So we need to be a bit wary. So at least I would hope that this at least means if Alfie still goes, where to a club, by the way, he might actually get the credit he deserves for his Europa League performance. Watching Romelu Lukaku getting that award today for 8 goals, and he scored an own goal in the final. No, this Alfie obviously needs. He might be thinking to get myself to Lille or Inter Milan or somebody before I actually get the recognition for the 100 odd goals he scored in last season's competition. But I at least we'll be able to spend some of that money on players. And I think generally just the prestige as well, the actual feeling of going through. I was the same as yourself and a few other Rangers fans. I was thinking maybe we don't need this in terms of winning the title. Maybe this is what we, in terms of playing, we maybe don't need another European run. Maybe that's what's hitting the legs after the winter break. Well, there's no winter break this year anyway, and after what we did in Holland, you find yourself, you've been thinking as a football fan, you're always thinking about the next game, you're always thinking about the long term, but you're sitting there watching your team winning 4-0 against an Eredivisie side in the Netherlands. You're thinking this is just phenomenal. This is in and of itself, just watching them doing it, the pride you're feeling is through the roof. And again last night, it's just so enjoyable. Yeah, I mean, it's, as you've been saying, it's bittersweet because we're not actually there, and you're thinking about the atmosphere. But that was another thing I was worried about, was maybe we couldn't cope with Galatasaray, that kind of level, if we didn't have 50,000 bears going absolutely crazy at Ibrox. But no, empty stadiums away, empty stadiums at home. These players just love playing in Europe for Rangers, and I love watching them. And I think, the money that we make from this now, albeit maybe slightly reduced in previous seasons, is going to help us as much as the actual kind of general confidence in achieving domestically as well. But one thing I just like to say is I think getting to the group stage 3 years in a row, it is a cup. It is just from where we were. An unknown Mexican manager, embarrassing himself in a hedge in Luxembourg City, trying to justify us going out after one game, to Fatih Terim, one of the world's most famous managers, embarrassing himself at the technical area at Ibrox last night because we've absolutely owned them. It's unbelievable, and we need trophies domestically. But what Stevie G's done in Europe, even if it stops now, even if we don't get out of this group, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's up there with some of the greatest achievements in Rangers history.
Yeah, that's where I was going to come next, Ross, and I'll let you finish up on this one. It's now the usual suspects were spouting off on Twitter last night. Your Graham Spears and all the rest of them sort of criticising Gerrard for not yet having a trophy. Now, it is a criticism with a certain amount of validity, I suppose, but as Alex has sort of pointed out there, where Rangers were under Pedro and then under Murty, we were a shell of a club. Now, people have said that, Gerrard has got the backing, so why is there no trophies? But one thing I think Gerrard deserves credit for is he's made his own backing in a certain way by getting Rangers into the group stages. So he's done it 3 years in a row, and produced the extra revenue that has helped, bring in greater players and all the rest of it. And it kind of feels that when Gerrard goes to the board and maybe asks for, I need this or I need that, they say, well, get us into the group stages. He does it, and I know the silverware at home is the next step. We need to start winning at least a trophy this season. But I don't think you can give him enough credit for what he's done in Europe for Rangers, because, as Alex just said there, not that long ago, our manager was standing in a hedge trying to justify one of the worst results in our history. Now we're taking on Legia Warsaw, Rapid Vienna, Porto, Villarreal, taking on all comers, Fiorentina, Braga, you name it. They've come to Ibrox and we've sent them packing. And I think a lot of that is to do with Steven Gerrard and how he sets his team up in these games. So he deserves the credit, and he now deserves the backing because, you know, he's helped bring that extra revenue into the club.
Did you say Fiorentina there? Have I missed the game?
Did I say Fiorentina? What did I mean? Did I not say Feyenoord?
I was thinking, Christ, what was I doing that day?
You didn't go to that game.
Didn't go to that one.
I meant Feyenoord. If I did say Fiorentina, I meant Feyenoord.
Aye, that makes more sense. Yeah, look, it's one hell of a transformation. I was thinking last night, I was going, Christ, can you imagine Graham Murty in this game? Like, imagine Graham Murty's temperament when we are 2-0 up and then Galatasaray pull a goal back with 5 minutes to go. You know, he wouldn't have enough headstands in his locker to get him through that one. It's a hell of a way that we've come. And yeah, this is the reason that Gerrard is still in the position, is because despite those blips at home, that actually the most impressive ones surely was still that first season when we got into the group stages, when we went through Shkupe and Ufa in Russia and Maribor. You know, there were some difficult ties there, and we went all that way. And to do it consistently 3 years in a row, I mean, you take us back 15 years, we wouldn't necessarily get to group stages of European competition 3 years in a row, 3 seasons running. So it's a really wonderful achievement financially. I know it does wonders for the club, and it really, really alleviates some pressure that COVID would have put on the finances at the club. So yes, there is always going to be that question mark over domestic trophies, and you have to wonder if it's not this season, then how much time does Europa League actually buy him? You know, at what point does that goodwill and that credit run out if he can't turn it into domestic success? But I never want us to underestimate the achievements that we're doing here, and the fact that we're now not just qualifying for the group stages, but all three of us have looked at this and gone, I'll be disappointed if we don't get out of this group. You know, that'll be a letdown for us if we don't progress even further. And I sort of referenced it earlier. The benefit that brings in terms of Europe being back on the continental stage, getting, you know, the spotlight shone on them again. Results like last night are impressive. And as you say, I live in London. I work for an English company, and folk down here are very disrespectful of Scottish football. But you come in on a morning like today, and you have people contacting you going, Christ, that's a good result. That's you know, and because people know Galatasaray, people know those players, and they see Radamel Falcao, they see Sofiane Feghouli. They see the manager, Fatih Terim, and they go, that is a hell of a result. That would have been a good result for a Man United or an Arsenal or a Spurs. So for us to do that, it builds the prestige, it rebuilds the reputation from the damage we've suffered in the last decade. So yes, I think that buys him time. I don't know how long that credit will last. And if there are still no trophies at the end of this season, as we've discussed on the pod before, it'll be a very difficult decision for the board. But last night, Gerrard has made that decision even harder.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he deserves a lot of credit, and it's not just helped on the park. I think it's helped off the park as well. You know, it's helped the club recover from where it was not so long ago, and it's all good. You know, it's good. When I woke up this morning, it was just like, ping, yes, let's get up and face the world, because you just felt so happy at that result last night. You know what I mean? So guys, I think we've covered it all there, and we'll call time on this wee show today. So guys, that's everything from this wee extra Gersnet podcast show. Remember that, as you'll know, we're in the group stages with Benfica, Standard Liège, and Lech Poznan. We will be there all the way through. We'll provide comment and all the rest of it. We've got the forums, we'll be giving you articles, social media, there's obviously the podcast. Remember guys, there's a history archive on the website as well. It's all original, independent and free content made by fans for you. So get yourself onto Gersnet at any time. There will be a show on Sunday night. I believe Ross is hosting on Sunday night. We'll obviously cover the Ross County game, and there'll be a wee bit more chat, I'm sure, on last night's brilliant victory in the group stages. This was just a sort of reactionary show after the draw was made. So in the meantime, get yourself onto the website, as I said, and join Ross on Sunday, and bye for now.